Hey guys, so I might get started. First of all, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is the first of this type of webinar that Club 360 has conducted, but it's something we are hoping to continue to do, especially with the present situation. With the current climate, it seems that online mediums such as this is a good way to get information out to people. We know that different people consume information in different ways, and in addition to the print and social media and video content that we are continuing to try and put out, we also thought that it would be worth incorporating some online lectures as an additional medium. Club 360 has a lot of different specialists in various fields, and I believe that we have a lot to offer people in terms of increasing everybody's health literacy. Now, I have to admit that neither Colin and I are tech experts, and this is the first of this type of webinar that we've conducted. So just be patient. We might have a few little technical glitches here and there, but yeah, just be patient, and hopefully we'll get through this relatively smoothly. I will just request that everyone keeps their microphones muted and their video off for the duration of the presentation, and then at the end we will have some time for Q&A. If you do have any questions throughout the presentation, you can just put them in the chat function, and then we can get to those questions at the end of the presentation. Alternatively, if you're comfortable sharing your microphone and or video, you can actually ask your question in person. So the basic rundown of tonight's presentation, we're going to be discussing, how this current situation is forcing us to be more sedentary, and ways that we can deal with that and become more active. We're going to discuss some exercise options. We're going to talk a little bit about home ergonomics. We're going to be discussing sleep and ways in which we can optimize our sleep. We'll talk a little bit about maintaining healthy eating and drinking habits. And then also we'll be talking a little bit about combating worry and adversity. This is a very unique situation, and we'll talk about this in a little more detail in a second, but it's affecting all of us differently. But I think that the focus of the talk tonight will be how we can be as positive as possible about this, and how we can all sort of grow and learn from the current situation that we're in. Some of you may know me. For those of you who don't, my name's Sam Gilbert. I'm a physiotherapist, strength and conditioning specialist and ergonomic consultant. I'm also the co-founder and clinical director at Club 360. I'm a former karate competitor, which is what brought me to Japan initially, a little over 15 years ago. Club 360 is a multidisciplinary health and rehabilitation practice. We offer a range of different services, including physiotherapy and osteopathy, personal training, massage, boxing, kickboxing, group exercise classes, Pilates, and nutrition consulting. So we see people in a range of different health states, from people who are in acute pain right through to people who are aiming to perform at high levels of athletic performance. So we see people all along that spectrum of health. And whilst a lot of what we do is combating some form of adversity, fixing certain conditions, or helping people manage certain conditions, we also do try and focus a lot on prevention, and that's a lot of what we'll be talking about tonight. I'll let Colin go through a bit of an introduction for himself. Colin?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So I'm a cognitive and behavioural psychotherapist of around 10 years standing now. I've been in Japan in total for about 7 years. This is my second stint here. I work mainly through the Tokyo Medical Surgical Clinic, and I work with a range of common psychological problems using evidence-based psychotherapy, mainly cognitive behavioural therapy, because that's really where the evidence base is, and I've really focused on that in my clinical practice. But I'm training other therapists as well, interpersonal psychotherapy, EMDR, eye movement, psychotherapy, EMDR, if anybody knows that, but I don't really use it in my practice. I find that cognitive behavioral therapy really does everything that I need. Yeah, I'm a big convert to it, and I'm passionate about it.
Great. So this situation that we're in at the moment is very unique, and it's not something that I don't think any of us have really experienced before. Now, I know that there's people, the majority of the people listening in tonight are from Japan, but we also have some people from outside Japan. This situation is affecting all of us differently. It may be affecting us differently country-wise, depending on our location. You know, we know some countries are in pretty heavy lockdown. Other countries, such as Japan, are taking a little bit more conservative approach to handling the situation and addressing that social isolation. But also affect us differently depending on our personal circumstance and also our personality. And it may be our occupational circumstances or family circumstances. And because of the unique situation, it requires unique approaches. Like I said before, we're trying to approach this as positively as possible, and trying to learn as much from the situation as possible. So learning as much about each other, learning new skills, and learning as much about ourselves as we can. For a lot of people, working in or living in isolation is creating a lot more of a sedentary life. There's that temptation to become more sedentary. A lot of us are working from home. We have limited opportunity for going out and socializing, and less access to sports and recreation. For some people, you know, there may be some of you who are used to working from home, and obviously in that case, you're not going to be as affected to the same degree. For some people, this may actually be an improvement in lifestyle. So if you're someone who, when you're at the office, you're typically sitting in the same position for extended periods of time, this may be a good chance. You're maybe a little less restricted in what you have to do at work, and you can get out and walk around. For those of you who have more of an active job where you're going to and from meetings and things like that, and now you're forced to be in pretty much the same position all day, then that's going to reduce your activity levels. So if that's the case, then you need to make a conscious effort to be more active. Some of the ways that we can address that. Sorry, just looking to the next slide here. So step trackers are really useful. A lot of you, I know, use step trackers already. A lot of people will have data on the numbers of steps subconsciously, even if you're not used to tracking it and looking at those numbers. Most of us will have that data on our phones. So it's worth looking at the data of the number of steps that you're used to taking, and trying to match that. So if you know that the number of steps that you're taking at the moment is down a lot compared to what you usually take, then try to actually make the effort to bring that number up so that it's even. So that may be purposely going out and taking walks. It may be just getting up and walking around your house or apartment. I know that can be tedious, especially in Japan, where most of us live in relatively small places. But having, you know, they say what you can measure, you can manage, and it's very easy to measure the number of steps you're taking. So that's one easy strategy that you can employ. You want to treat stairs as your friend, so taking the stairs where possible. Those of you who are living in apartments, try to take your apartment stairs rather than the elevator, even if it's just a few staircases at a time, just to get in that extra activity. If you're living in a house, every time that you have to go up and down the stairs, even if you've only got one flight of stairs in your house, try and do that several times. So if you need to go upstairs to get something, go up, come back down, go back up again. You might even want to, you know, walk up and back down every single step so that you're getting that extra climb in. You might want to do other things like do a push-up on every step. Just other little ways like that you're trying to get some extra activity in. And stand where possible. So I know a lot of people employ standing as part of their ergonomic interventions at work. So the use of a standing desk either for some of the day or the entire day. If you're not used to this, it's probably not a good idea to go from sitting all the time to standing the entire time. I actually had a patient in today who went from standing about 50% of the time at work, and he thought he would capitalize on the opportunity to work from home and change to sitting the entire time. He does have a history of previous back issues, and his back issues have actually worsened as a result of that unaccustomed sitting time. So, unaccustomed standing time. So if you aren't used to standing for long periods of time, you may want to ease into that. But it's a good idea to try and do that. We know that from research that replacing 1 hour of sitting with 1 hour of standing reduces our all-cause mortality. So all-cause mortality is basically just our risk of dying. So if we do that for prolonged periods of time, for years on end, we can make substantial improvements to our health. As far as exercise goes, most of us will most likely not be able to do the previous forms of exercises we're used to. And so we need a little bit of a change in attitude and mindset to try and continue getting the health benefits we want to get from exercise. Rather than just saying, I can't get to the gym and do a boxing workout, or I can't play tennis with my friends, I'm just going to sit around and watch Netflix. We need to find other things that we can do. Like I said, the situation that we're in has created opportunity to learn new skills, and so there's a lot of things that you can learn, such as yoga or even basic martial arts. There's a lot of online programs that you can take where you can learn things from your home. Obviously, there's a lot of other types of exercise which you do need specific equipment or at least space to do, but there are a lot of things that you can do without that. So take that opportunity to try and learn some new skills. Try and keep a routine. So I know there's a lot of us that as we're working from home, our routines are disrupted and start to get a little more lax. It's important to write your training sessions, your exercise time into your diary. So around whatever meetings or other commitments that you have when you're working from home, try and write those exercise times in so that they're in the diary, they're there, they're part of your routine, and it's something that you're going to stick to. Incorporate family and be creative with exercise choices. I'm going to show some specific examples of those in just a second. Setting challenges is a good way to keep motivated. So, for example, trying to do 50 push-ups a day for the next week, and if you've accomplished that goal, then increase that to maybe 60 push-ups a day for the next week. And that's just a random example of something that can be quantified and something that you can improve on. And write those goals down and keep yourself accountable to them. Just going to show some example exercise videos here. So those of you who are used to doing strength training, obviously strength training is a big part of what we do at Club 360 as part of our personal training programs, and also our physiotherapy and osteopathy revolves a lot around that. Here we've got our osteopath Max, just taking a simple movement pattern such as an overhead press and demonstrating a few different variations and progressions of that. So going from a simple band press to a harder band press, into these push-up variations, all the way up to a very advanced movement such as a handstand push-up. So that's a way that you can take a certain exercise or a certain movement pattern and do a number of progressions. And if you follow our social media, Max is he's putting out examples of these for all the different movement patterns from his own home. So there's a lot that you can do in terms of strength training. Likewise, here's a video of several exercises that can be performed using a chair. So different variations of push-ups here, different squatting variations from a simple two-legged squat to a split squat, pistol squat, going from very easy to advanced variations. Bridging variations and even a rowing variation there. So the key is just to try and be as creative as possible. trying to involve family and getting outside. Most of us in both hemispheres, I think, are experiencing or starting to experience some fairly nice weather now. So it makes sense to try and get out and enjoy it. Now, obviously, as I alluded to earlier, some parts of the world are in a stricter degree of lockdown than others, so this might not be possible for everyone. But it's a good chance to, get outside, get some fresh air, get some vitamin D. Here's just some footage of my wife doing an outside training session in a park, and she's doing that together with our 2 little boys. Getting some assistance, using the kids as a bit of resistance there. Enjoying that whole exercise process together, and also encouraging our kids and teaching them good exercise habits from an early age. Anything that you can do together as a family, I think is going to be beneficial. And, both my wife and I are into combat sports. We don't get a lot of time to train together, so we've taken advantage of this opportunity being at home together to try to get in some training time with each other. And you can see by the way that my wife punches, it's a little bit of extra motivation to make sure I'm taking the garbage out at night as well. By that same token, just need to make sure that you're being careful and wearing the appropriate protective equipment. There's a nice friendly sparring session with my wife. She ended quite badly for one of us. So there's just a few things to consider with exercise. I'm going to hand it over to Colin now, who's actually going to speak a little bit about sleep. And I'm just going to unmute you there, Colin.
Great. Thanks very much, Sam. Okay. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about sleep. I'm going to start with just a context really about what is sleep. I mean, broadly speaking, there are 3 brainwave patterns, broadly speaking: non-REM, which is our deep sleep; REM, rapid eye movement, which is when we're dealing with emotions, essentially when we're dreaming, and we're putting the previous stage trying to it's almost like a recycle box that the brain is using, and of course wakefulness is another brain wave, and there is another one which is being unconscious in a coma. That's completely different. That's you're not aware of your surroundings. But what's important to say is that even when you sleep, you're still aware of your surroundings, which is why somebody walks into your room and you wake up with a start. So you are still aware of your surroundings. So that I can't possibly do justice really about what sleep actually is. This is a real whistle stop. Any sleep experts out there would put me to shame, I'm sure. So why do we need sleep? I think actually nobody really knows why we need sleep, but there's a lot of there's a lot of theory. All of these theories: restoration, conservation of energy and resources, early brain development, memory, learning consolidation, which is what REM sleep is associated with. These are all pretty convincing, but they're not 100% convincing. I mean, some animals sleep virtually all day, like koalas. Koalas aren't much fun at a zoo. And some animals, they simply don't sleep. Some mammals don't sleep. I mean, for example, a whale doesn't sleep, always has one part of the brain switched on, I guess, so that it doesn't drown. So early brain development, our brain doesn't stop growing until we think it was 25, but we think it's 30 now. But, the good news is that, brain plasticity. So as the brain cells, it's all downhill from 30, I'm afraid. And but once those brain cells start going, the brain is very plastic and is able to compensate for that. I mean, you're talking of trillions of of cells. So there's plenty to go around. Don't worry about it. Um, so the next slide. Okay, so what you see here is the rough architecture of sleep. So the top diagram is a rough conversion of sleep during the night. It's recorded on something called a hypnogram, and it's been sort of tidied up and made clearer in the bottom diagram. So the top one is raw, the bottom one is tidied up, and what you can see is that we actually have, some people have less, some people have more, but the average is 5 to 6 separate sleep cycles during a full period of sleep, each comprising of non-REM phase, which is deep sleep, and an REM phase. So we're going to look at the stages of these this sleep in a little bit more detail on the next slide. So you can see, looking more closely at one of the sleep cycles at the top of the page, is which is taking a slice, that first sleep cycle actually. So you'll see there's different stages from going into sleep. Nobody can actually tell the moment when we sleep. We sort of fall into sleep, and then breathing changes, deep sleep begins, and it's a very rhythmical kind of sleep. Have you ever seen somebody in deep sleep? It's a sort of you'll know when they're in deep sleep, and then you'll know when they're in REM sleep, because you get this sort of sound. It changes, and then maybe at the end of a sleep cycle, people will generally wake up for a very short period of time, because at the end of the REM cycle, you're very close to wakefulness, and it's very normal that people would sleep up to wake up 2 or 3 times, 4 times even during the night, often going to the bathroom or just turning over, and it's usually 5 to 15 minutes. And Sam, if you just go back to the previous slide just for 1 second, right? So, something I should have pointed out here, if you notice the deep sleep, so the troughs, you'll notice that actually in the first 2 cycles, you're getting most of the deep sleep that you need, okay? That's what we might associate with restorative sleep. So actually, if anybody that's worrying they're not getting enough sleep, and maybe they're getting a couple of 90-minute cycles of sleep, remember each of these is a 90-minute cycle. Actually, if you're having, say, 2 cycles, you're probably getting enough sleep that you actually need. It's just that the rest is associated more with kind of REM sleep, kind of emotions, and you know, putting the creating memories and things like that. So the purpose of that really is to decatastrophize the idea of not getting enough sleep. You probably are. So let's go to the next slide. That's it. Okay, so factors that might affect your sleep, obvious things really: caffeine, nicotine, lifestyle factors, alcohol. That's an interesting one, because alcohol can be a bit of a sedative to begin with, but actually it becomes, have you ever gone to a nightclub or something, and people are drunk and they're dancing, and that's the stimulant part of alcohol, and actually it can send you asleep, but it will disrupt your sleep pattern, particularly the deep sleep that you need. It's not very restorative, in the sense that it can set up an unhelpful pattern that if you're using alcohol to sleep, it can disrupt the sleep pattern. You become tired and maybe more stressed the next day, and if you're then using alcohol to sleep, it's going to set up a really unhelpful pattern actually, and people use it as a stress reliever, but actually it creates more stress actually. In moderation, it's a great thing. As a rule of thumb, maybe 2 hours before you go to bed, and not too much. Diet, so don't go to bed full, don't go to bed hungry. Exercise is a great thing. Don't exercise too close to bedtime, because your heat rises, and we'll see that actually when you sleep, your body the temperature actually reduces. Okay, so exercise, but not too close to bedtime. Don't go for a run just before you go to bed, unless you don't have a problem with sleep and it works for you. In that case, not a problem. Some of the environmental factors, light, so we'll look at the light dark cycle. That's really important for sleep. So you want to reduce light, particularly the blue light that you might get from an iPhone, for example, or an iPad. So make sure you've got your night shift on. Really, you don't really want to be using your bed for anything other than sleep and intimacy. Anything else you should go somewhere else, really. So noise, if there's a problem with noise, different types of headphones, noise cancelling, foam headphones, wax headphones, earplugs, I'm sorry. And so you can experiment with different things. Actually, probably noise cancelling headphones probably aren't going to be that helpful, but you can get actually noise cancelling machines that are helpful for some people. Some people call them white noise machines. So managing room temperature, 18 degrees is optimal. Body temperature, sometimes having a bath, maybe an hour before bed, can help that drop in temperature. Make sure your room is aired, get fresh air in there. Bed comfort, when was the last time you changed your mattress? One of the best investments you'll make. Turn the clock away, don't be a clock watcher. Although we'll find out maybe if you're tossing and turning, you're not sleeping. If you're awake for more than 15 minutes, really you should get up and just go and do something rather than just tossing and turning. And that's the dilemma, because actually you might then need to check the time on a clock. Okay, so those are some of the environmental factors. Broadly speaking, how is sleep controlled? The circadian rhythm, that's the rhythm of the moon. It's essentially the light dark cycle, and melatonin is created in a gland in the middle of the brain, and it creates a sleep debt. And basically, when night comes, you've got to pay back that sleep debt, and it's like an elastic band. It gets tighter and tighter, and it snaps, and you go back to sleep, and it gradually starts the process all over again. Homeostasis is just the natural state of the body, fluids, and the cells and things like that, and temperature as well. The external and internal temperature. External is ideally around 18 degrees, really. Think about your PJs as well. So no thermal PJs in the summer. It's a complex interaction there. Yeah, that's it. So we move on to the next one, and yeah, it's just really the biological clock, circadian rhythm, production of melatonin. It is important. Circadian rhythm disorders can happen. They're not uncommon. Things like jet lag, shift work can bring that sort of thing on. If you're in Japan, you're working on a different time zone. There might be an issue there. Okay. But there's something there about keeping routines. Our clocks are set differently. Some of us are owls, some of us are larks. I don't know if that's genetically based or rather if that's social based, depending on what our values and interests are. Me, I'm definitely an owl. I'll work late into the evening and I'll struggle to get up. I always have. Whereas other people will get up very, very early, go for a run. I couldn't think of anything worse myself. I would always go for a run in the early evening. So that tends to be about our values and maybe what our patterns set down when we were younger. Okay, so something that can keep us awake is the racing mind. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit more about worry a little bit later. So just having a little think about why this happens in the middle of the night in relation to sleep. Okay, so we're going to the next slide there. So this is a fantastic system. I mean, again, this really does not do justice to the complexity of the brain at all. But this is what happens essentially with anxiety. It produces cortisol. Cortisol is the thing that if you get injured, it inhibits swelling, sort of keeps us fighting or running away. And adrenaline is the thing that keeps us running and fighting. It's a great system, but not in the middle of the night when we're trying to sleep, or in fact, trying to sleep might be part of the problem, as we will see in a moment. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. So this is something generally that happens, this kind of cascade. Wonder what he thinks of me. The worry, the adrenaline. I can't get to sleep. What was that noise? Oh, I can't believe it's 3 o'clock. I'm never going to be able to get to sleep now. And actually, what is really interesting about this cycle is the moment we give up at, like, come 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, say, I can't get to sleep. What's the point? Bang, you're out like a light. Okay, once you stop struggling to sleep. So this is often what happens. That initial worry in the middle of the night always turns into a problem of I can't sleep. Okay, so what can we do about it? Sam, keep an eye on the time here to cue me if I'm going over here. So the thing to do is to understand this cascade, this thinking cascade, and really to identify that first initial thought. The racing mind, worry can keep us away. We'll address some more strategies about what we can do about worry, but essentially try not to interact with that first thought. One of the gentle things that we can do is just to thought stopping isn't a great thing generally, but actually just pushing away that initial thought with something neutral, like a neutral word like just saying something very neutral, just gently pushing it away and seeing if that has an effect. But try not to interact with the first thought. But the problem is you can't, it's very difficult to push away thoughts because it's a little bit like a beach ball that you press into the sea, and when you let go of the beach ball, it just comes up with extra force. So you've got to be careful with this and be gentle. Just push it away gently, and but we'll look at some more strategies about managing worry. All right. So some things that you can do. Here's some ideas about not interacting with that first thought. Outlining the plot of a TV series or a book. Focus on a boring, repetitive image. Counting backwards, 0 to 100. Counting sheep. Now that's an interesting one. Counting sheep. What we don't want it to look like is in the next slide. Like this. So don't overcomplicate it. Don't make it too challenging. Okay. So so you don't want to be doing that. But what's interesting about counting sheep, it is an important point, because if you're counting sheep in your mind, just kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's probably not going to have that much of an effect. It has to be a little bit challenging. So what I would suggest is, if you're counting sheep, don't just count sheep, but become acquainted with the types of sheep and count the types of sheep, but name the breed as well. That can be quite helpful, or something similar to that. All right. So if it doesn't work for you, try another one. Try a different strategy. Okay, and we'll look at some of the other strategies that you can try. All right. So things like imagery. So the idea of putting your thought on a leaf, letting it float down the stream. This is in the realms of mindfulness. You see lots of these exercises on YouTube. Thought on a train, on a cloud, letting it go, using spontaneous imagery, just seeing the colors. So sometimes when you shut your eyes, you see a stream of colors. Well, name the colors. It's a wonderful thing to be able to, it's like, imagining if you've ever seen a picture of Venice in the spring, you see a picture of Venice, and when you see it, you say, well, describe all the different shades of red in this picture. And actually you start seeing lots of different shades of red. So you can kind of use spontaneous imagery with whatever you see. So don't suppress the thoughts. If you're going to push them away, be very gentle with it. So just allow them to be. Observe the idea of mindfulness. I get, and I'm not a mindfulness practitioner. There's lots of people much better at it than me. But it's the idea of really just observing them, not interacting with the distress. Sometimes seeing a bigger picture. Accepting them, accepting the distress, and living alongside it, really tolerating it, and that paradoxically can kind of reduce the stress. But I'm not going to really go too much into mindfulness now. But okay, so putting the day to rest, a journal. So what you might want to do at the end of the day is write down any loose ends, any problems that emerge from the day before you go to bed. If you do worry, maybe set aside 15 to 20 minutes to do a little bit of worrying, particularly worries that can be solved. We're going to look a little bit more about worry, but broadly speaking, there's two types of worry. There's worry you can do something about, there's worry you can't do anything about, and then there's that sort of worry that is a real worry that you can't do anything about, like the COVID situation at the moment. And then there's a thing about controlling what you can, and there has to be some acceptance of the situation, but even within that, there are things you can do, things you can't do. At night, if you're having worries, any new worries, you can write them down and deal with them the next day, maybe in your worry time, or set aside some time to problem solve. If you're worrying about them, reminding yourself, now is not the time to worry about it. You've got some time to worry, and make sure you allocate some time to either problem solve or just worry. Just allocate some time to do that. But remind yourself, if you allocate that time, just remind yourself that during the night is probably not the time to be doing it. Okay. So yeah, here's some ideas about sleep. So most people overestimate how long it takes to fall asleep, underestimate how long they sleep in total, and actually just knowing this can help. Yeah, okay, so 3 mechanisms that trick people into overestimating the degree of sleep loss: worrying, sleep-related threats, using emotional reasoning. So because I feel something, it must make it true. Okay, so the judgments about sleep and daytime. So if you think that sleep makes you look completely drained and makes you look 30 years older, I'd suggest you take a selfie every single day and then try and work out which is the day you had a lack of sleep, or ask a friend which day it is. So our thoughts are always, they're true, but they might not be right. They might not be giving us the right information. There's some kind of experiments, behavioral experiments. Don't over exaggerate. So to catastrophize the problem. What you think might not actually be the case. Don't cancel anything because of a lack of sleep. If you're operating heavy machinery or driving a taxi, that might be different. Yeah, but don't postpone. So the idea is essentially to stay awake. This is paradoxical intention. Okay, so don't try to sleep. Try to stay awake. So my little boy, or my, he would, his mum would, say, just try and get to sleep. Try and sleep. Just try a little bit harder. And of course, it doesn't work. So of course, I come along and I say, well, actually, son, what you need to do is just stay awake a little bit longer. And there you go. Within 5 minutes, he's asleep, just like that. That's probably the only bit of fathering I've done particularly well in this past few months. So yeah, the idea is to try and stay awake, and it's a paradoxical intention which will allow sleep to take you over. All right. I don't know if my wife's listening to this, but yeah. So a realistic attitude about sleep. So recognizing that there is a lot within your control, probably more than you think, actually, in relation to sleep. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Colin. There's some great points there. I really like the idea of allocating time for worry during the day, so you're not thinking about it at night. I think that's a great one. I will be spending a bit of time before I go to sleep tonight looking up different types of sheep, because I can name exactly 0 different breeds of sheep. I know my colleague Chris Marshall's listening on this, and maybe he can help me with that. And I'll also be employing that one about telling the kids to stay awake, because I think that could work quite well on my son. I'm going to talk a little bit about home workplace setup now. So for a lot of us, we are working in an environment that's going to be different to what we're used to. Now, in terms of how that affects our posture and the way that we set up our workplace, one of the most important concepts that we try and push when we discuss ergonomics and posture is that there's no perfect posture. So there's no perfect way of sitting, perfect way of setting up your workspace. Variation is the key. So the most important factor is just keep on changing the position that you're in. So even if you get into a position that's not, your textbook ergonomic setup, as long as you keep switching in and out of that, it's going to lead to less stress on the tissues and, potentially decrease the likelihood of a sort of postural or workplace related injury. Now, as I said at the start of the presentation, this situation affects us all differently. So some people might find that they're actually able to change their position more frequently now. So if you are limited to one space when you're at work, you've got your desk and that's where you spend the majority of your time. And now you're at home and you've got several places where you can set up a workspace, then you should try and take advantage of this. For a lot of us though, you may be restricted either by just the constraints of where you live, or by the room allocation. You've got family members in other parts of the house, or there's just parts of the house that you can't work, so you're going to be limited there. So like I said, if you can change position, try and do so. So even if it's sitting on the couch with your legs extended with your laptop resting on your lap, whilst again, that's not a great position to be in for hours on end, if you're there for 20 or 30 minutes, it's fine. It's changing the stress on the tissues and just dispersing those stresses throughout the body. Try and spend some time standing if able. So we talked about this in terms of increasing our activity levels, but it's also good in terms of changing the position, changing the stress on the body. So when you're sitting, our spines are generally in more of what we call a flexed posture. So we're going to be in this position here where the spine is relatively rounded. When we're standing, the spine is relatively more extended. So it just allows our back and our hips and our pelvis in particular to be in slightly different positions. Now, we do have to be careful with this. So if you have some history of lower back pain and you go from, as I described in the example of the patient I had this morning, where you go from a position where you're sitting the majority of the time, then you decide to take this opportunity to switch things up and stand for a long period of time, just make sure you're making that change gradually and not switching over straight away. So having said that, whilst we do want to vary our posture, and there's no perfect posture, there are positions that are inherently slightly less stressful for the body. So if we think of having a base posture where we spend the majority of our time, or maybe half of our time, and we have different postures that we move in and out of, that base posture should follow some basic guidelines. Now, these are very basic guidelines that we use for your average person who has no major musculoskeletal issues. Now, if you have had an injury that's been perhaps related in some way to the way that you're sitting or to periods of time spent at work, then it's probably best that you consult someone before making any sort of drastic changes to your posture. But the basic setup we recommend, the top of the monitor should be at approximately eye level. So you shouldn't be looking down or shouldn't be up excessively for too long. The monitor should be approximately 1 arm's length away. So if you straighten your arm out, you should be just able to touch the monitor. Elbows tucked into the side, so you don't want to be reaching out. You want the elbows to be relatively close to the torso, which puts the shoulders into more of a relaxed position. You should have your mouse relatively close to your keyboard and not out too far, so you're consistently having to move in another direction. Sit back into the chair. Now, again, it's fine to slump for certain periods of time. But when you sort of assume that base posture and you sort of reset things, you want to try and sit your hips back into the chair as much as possible. The hips should be at knee height or slightly higher. So if you're a relatively tall person and you have your setup at the office adjusted for that, but when you're at home, you don't have that same sort of setup, you may want to have pillows or towels or something on your seat or your chair to raise that height slightly so that the knees aren't up too high. The higher the knees are, the more difficult it's going to be to maintain more of a neutral lower back position. Monitor and keyboard directly in front. So this will depend on your setup. If you can, obviously the constraints of where you're working at home is going to dictate how you set things up, but you don't want to be rotated for excessive periods of time. If you're using 2 monitors, try and have the one that you're using most frequently closer to the center. If you're using 2 monitors in equal amounts, you want to try and have the center of the monitor directly in front, or the gap between the 2 monitors directly in front of you, or you want to be working in a way where you can switch position, especially if you're spending a lot of time working at each monitor. Switch your position so you actually turn so that monitor is in front of you, and then change position so you're working on that second monitor with it in front of you as well. Keyboard pegs flat. Again, you can change them up and down, but the majority of the time you want your keyboards to be set, so the keyboard pegs to be set flat so that the keyboard's relatively flat. So you don't want to have the wrist in that extended position for too long. If we keep it extended like so, you tend to get a little bit of fatigue and overuse through the forearm muscles. Can also cause a little bit of compression in the wrist, and also tends to be correlated with some increase in shoulder tension as well. So how do we accomplish? Sorry, I'll just show just a visual representation of what this looks like. So we talked about seat height here, hips above knees, elbows tucked in, eyes at approximately the top of the screen height, and then the monitor approximately 1 arm's length away. So for those of us who have laptops at home, which is probably the majority of people these days, and I know that a lot of companies are having their employees work on laptops at the office as well. It's a good idea to purchase a laptop stand and use an external keyboard and mouse where possible. Now, this is especially important if you are used to working on a desktop at the office and now you're working on a laptop at home. That's a pretty drastic change in terms of the position and the posture that your body's going to be in. So it's like if you are used to running in a heavy supportive shoe and all of a sudden you decide to go and change to barefoot. That's a big change in the stress on your feet and on the rest of your body. Now, it's not to say that barefoot running is bad, but if you do it that quick, if you do that change too quickly, then it does impose a fair bit of stress on the body. So it's the same with your laptop. If you're used to being in a certain posture that you're sitting in when you're using a desktop, and normally you might spend 80 or 90% of the time at a desktop, and now that's gone to none of the time, you're spending 100% of the time on the laptop, that change is going to be is quite drastic for the body. So try and use an external setup if you can. If you don't have a stand, and now these things are very cheap these days, they're very portable, but even just piling a pile of books and putting your laptop on a pile of books can raise it to the appropriate height, and then using your external keyboard and monitor. The keyboard that I'm using at the moment is extremely small and portable, so it's angled slightly, so it sort of contours to the angles of the hand, so we're not bent like so at the wrist, and this actually folds up to be a similar size or slightly bigger than an iPhone 10X, so very small, very compact and portable. So those things are quite easy to implement, even if you have to travel a lot with your laptop, you can travel with that external setup as well. So that's one thing that we do recommend most workers incorporate, but especially if you're used to using a desktop at work. And then trying to incorporate some of these movement snacks throughout the day. So this is what I call the desk-based exercises or workplace and postural exercises, but just thinking about them in terms of getting some snacks, some movement in throughout the day, just little bite-sized pieces of movement. Now, if you're interested, we have a program called Movement Snacks, which is on our PhysiTrack application. Those of you who've had physiotherapy consultations or even some personal trainers at Club 360 utilise the application, they'll have your exercise program set up there. We have a program. It's basically just a generic postural exercise program. Consists of 13 exercises, and if you're interested, you can just email the info at club360.jp and we can set you up with that PhysiTrack program. But here are just 5 of those 13 exercises that we recommend people do, and let's just go through them together. So I've got our lower back extensions. As I said, if you're sitting, you're most likely sitting with your back in a flex sort of posture. So we want to try and get up and reverse that direction as often as possible. So basically standing up, using your hands on your hips as a fulcrum, and then from there, just arching backwards. So you can incorporate this during the day, during those periods of time where you don't actually have to be sitting at your desk. You might do it every time you take a phone call, or if you're just having to read something that doesn't require you to be typing. So it's a really good exercise just to reverse that direction that most people are in when they're sitting. By the same token, chin tucks. A lot of us, as we go throughout the day, we tend to fall into this position where the head comes forwards, and we just want to, again, get the body moving in the opposite direction. So it would basically look like you're imagining that your head is the top drawer of a chest of drawers, and you're basically opening that drawer. So just pulling the chin back, not looking up and not looking down, just trying to bring it straight back like so. Upper back extensions. If you have a chair with a hard back that's not too high, I'll just demonstrate here. My chair's getting lost in our logo there, but basically using the chair as a bit of a fulcrum, placing your upper back against the chair, hands behind the head, and then trying to arch back over the chair like so. You might get a few cracks there. Most people find moving the upper back in that direction. Again, we're sitting in a rounded posture through our upper backs as well, and so getting that area of the body to move in the opposite direction is useful also. Buttock stretches. So we're sitting on our buttocks for long periods of time, and we're sitting with the hips in a fairly stationary position. So from time to time, it can be useful to just do a gentle stretch for the buttocks. So again, I think my leg's getting lost in my background there. Basically placing one leg over the other so that the foot is placed over the knee. And then from there, just bringing your chest down towards the leg, and you should feel a stretch in the buttock of the leg that's crossed over the other one. All right, and then a chest stretch. These can be done in a number of different ways, but an easy one to do, again, you might want to do this wherever you're having to read something, maybe on your phone or take a phone call, but basically placing the arm up against a door frame or a wall, and then basically moving forward and turning your body away from that arm until you're feeling a stretch through the front of the chest there. So they're just 5 examples of a wide range of exercises that can be incorporated at the desk. And it's maybe easier to build this habit at the moment for those of you who are in isolation. We prescribe these exercises to a lot of people normally, but there's always that barrier of having colleagues sort of look at you funny when you start doing weird movements in the office. If you're at home by yourself or even just with family, you don't have to worry about that. So it's maybe a good chance to build in some of those habits and getting some movement snacks in throughout the day. I'm going to hand back over to Colin now.
Great. Okay, thanks, Sam. How much time have I got, Sam? Here.
Sorry, let's 10, if we can do 10 minutes, and then I'll get through the last little bit in 5, and then we'll have 5 minutes for Q&A.
10. Okay, fine. So I'll go through it. This will be a little bit of a whistle stop about worry. So sometimes with worry, people that worry, you'll notice a what we call a worry chain. So this is quite common. There's usually a trigger. It could be uncertainty, or it could be something you find yourself what if, and find yourself worrying, and that can cause anxiety and the consequences of that. One of them can be not being able to sleep, being tired. It can impact confidence, and it can also bring a mood down as well. Sometimes worries are about things that are practical, things that we can do something about, and sometimes worries are hypothetical. They're worries we can't do anything about, and what we need to do if we find ourselves worrying is to try and work out a way to separate out kind of real event worries to hypothetical worries, or productive worries to hypothetical worries, helpful worries to unhelpful worries. Okay. Yeah. One of the ways we might do this is through a worry diary. I mean, there's different types of worry diary, and I mean, this one is really when you find yourself worrying, and at the end, the H and the P is really to separate out the worries into hypothetical or problems, practical worries, things you can do something about, things you can't do something about. You might even find yourself worrying, I think it'll be in the next slide, about you know, I need to do my maths homework. What if I don't get my maths homework in? Well, you need to that is a practical problem, so you need to change that into, in a sense, a problem statement, which is my maths homework needs to be in by Thursday, and then you can go into problem solving, which we're going to look at in a bit. So this is, a good example of something you can use when you're sleeping, and you can write your worry down and use that data in some allocated time the next day. Okay, so you can sort of journal it in the night. So essentially, is there anything I can do about it right now? And if you can, do it, or make a plan to do it. Think about what's stopping you, and sometimes you need to, if you're procrastinating, for example, you need to put the action before motivation. There is an idea that we need to wait for motivation. We don't. You can put the action first. You just need to turn it around. And if there isn't anything you can do about it, then the idea is to let the worry go. But we'll look at a little bit of about how we can do that. It's all very well saying that letting the worry go, but we'll have a little think about how we might do that. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. And so if it's hypothetical worry, then it's quite nice to allocate a little bit of time during the day to worry about it. Okay, and that really frees up the time. So, the hypothetical worries, you can allocate 20 minutes at a certain time. It's not that you're not going to be worrying about it. You just remind yourself that, you have a time to worry about it, and that's going to be in your worry time. People find that they might set sort of 30 minutes to worry time, and actually what they find out it's recurring worries, and they don't need anywhere near 30 minutes. So, you can really rein that in. It can be helpful for some people. If it is a problem for you, test it out, try it. And this is for hypothetical worries. Okay. It frees you up to enjoy the rest of your time. Okay. So plan your worry time, write down your hypothetical worries, refocus on the present moment. And then wait for your rescheduled worry time if you find yourself worrying again, and distract. Do something. There's a kind of bigger picture about what your values are, about the things that are meaningful and important to you. And I guess at that moment, it's about making a choice of, what you're going to choose to do at that moment. You've got your worry time. Yeah, if you're in the present moment, you're not worrying about the future. So refocusing techniques, we're going to send you a little bit of information. If this is an issue for you, there's something called attention refocusing. So we'll send a little pack out. I think that's right, isn't it, Sam? We'll send something out. Yeah. Okay. So this is about thinking about the senses, about you know, sound, sight, touch, taste, smell, using all of those to be able to refocus your attention. And actually what you might need to do is do a little bit of attention refocusing to allow you to kind of distract yourself naturally in the moment, because the idea is not to force it, but really for it to be a conscious choice about what you're doing. So you'll be able to flex that cognitive muscle by practicing attention refocusing. And the idea is not about stopping worry with worry time, it's about postponing it. I'm not saying you're not going to do it, it's just there's a time to do it, and right now isn't the time, if that makes sense. So worry is a future-oriented emotion. The difference between worry and rumination tends to be about the past. They're similar things. So worry undermines a person's ability to effectively problem solve. So you need to, so for real worries, problem solving really is the way to go. As I say, you've got more control over your worries than you think. There is an idea that worries can be uncontrollable. You know, this worry is going to be the death of me. If anybody's ever seen, anybody's familiar with the Mr. Men series, Mr. Worry is a really, really good case study in worry, that he thinks it's uncontrollable, but it really isn't. There are things you can do like worry time, and also problem solving. You need to turn the problem into a problem. Okay, I haven't done my maths homework. Okay, my maths homework needs to be in by Thursday. Then you can go into problem solving. We're going to send you a problem solving worksheet. Simply, what are my options? Pros and cons of each option. Choose the best option. You might need to troubleshoot it. So do it now, schedule it and review it. And then the final one might be to go back to step one to deal with any problems that emerge. A lot of successful people get into the habit of worrying about these things. They're very good at problem solving. They just forget to do it for themselves, and they tend to worry themselves through problems. So get into the habit of problem solving for real event worries, because it's an easy win, really. Just reinvigorate that skill. Okay, so the next problem. This is the worry tree. It's a nice heuristic to deal with worry. Actually, it's quite nice. Some people put it up on their fridge. It's quite a nice thing to do. So we'll move on to the next one. So relaxation techniques, progressive muscle relaxation. We're going to send you a little bit of information around that. Imagery, imagining, in the night, for example, when you sleep, visualizing a pleasing scene, somewhere peaceful, relaxed, somewhere maybe where you've been on holiday, using all of the senses, the smell, feeling it, the touch, the sensation of the sun, really feel the situation in as much fullness as you can. Imagination is a wonderful thing. If you imagine something, it's really the same part of the brain that lights up than if you in an MRI machine than if you actually did something. So imagination can be very evocative. Some people can't actually imagine things. There is about 10% of the population that find it difficult to use imagery. So if you can't, don't worry about it. You might need to think of a couple of examples, with imagery. Don't try too hard with imagery, particularly with sleep. Just going back to that relaxation, for example, I forgot to say in relation to sleep, if you're lying in bed and you're relaxing more than 15 to 20 minutes, if that's what you're doing, relaxing, that's fine. Just relax, just enjoy it. But see it as relaxing. It's the point of it is to relax. It's not to sleep. That might be the end result. That's a bonus, but it's not the purpose of relaxing. I should have mentioned that. Okay. So the next slide. Yeah, so acceptance. This is the idea of sometimes there's nothing we can do. Well, actually, there are things we can do, but sometimes it's better to accept the situation. So observing thoughts, don't judge, don't be critical of the thoughts. Think about the benefits of accepting the situation rather than being distressed by it. I mean, an example now is spending time, getting to know the kids, for example. It's really nice. They're not at school. It's really really difficult for them, but it's actually really nice spending time with the children. Um, don't pay too much attention to the distress. Thinking about the goals, thinking about the bigger picture. Is there something more meaningful than the distress? Thinking about what your longer term is. What the direction is you want your life to head in. Can you move in that direction, um, and allow the future to surprise you? So there's something about acceptance. I mean, examples might be what's it? For example, dementia. You know, going to see. I remember going to see a relative with dementia, and they wouldn't know who I was, but it was just actually really nice spending time with them and them getting to know me as Colin rather than the relative, if that makes sense. So there's something about accepting the situation. There's still things you can do, to make it kind of better. Um, Maybe I could have written a little bit more about that, but let's move on to the next slide. So this is really about the current situation. I'm thinking about the COVID situation and just thinking about different adjustment styles. There's lots of different styles, hopelessness, what's the point in doing anything? Helplessness, nobody can do anything. Fatalism, it's in the hands of the gods, of God or the doctors, denial, avoidance, threat. I don't know if there's anything I can do about this. But actually, probably the most helpful adjustment style is really, the challenge. It's not quite the fighting spirit. It's good. They call it Greer and Watson. They call it the fighting spirit, but it's really just thinking how you can exert control over this. And actually, what you find is the best outcomes tend to come between I can exert control and the realism of the threat that exists. I don't know if I can do anything about it, but I will do what I can. Okay, so just thinking about adjustment styles. Yeah, okay, so just something about looking after yourself. This was taken from the UK COVID guidance, actually, about looking after yourselves and looking after healthcare workers. If you want to, I don't think I've put a link, but it's on the Oxford Cognitive Therapy Centre resources site. There's a lovely video on there as well. And this is just really taken from there, looking after yourself, using strategies that have helped in the past, staying in touch with friends and family, even if it isn't in person. So using the media available, remembering emotions are normal, physical activity, eating, drinking, sleep. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Keeping up with study and training is really important. So not giving up and sort of still doing what you can online. I don't like that idea you have to learn a new skill. You don't. You can do whatever you want to do, but try and keep up with what your values and what's important for you. Trying to keep up the routine, especially the light dark cycle, planning activities that make you feel good, avoiding unhelpful strategies like smoking and alcohol, limit the time watching, reading, listening to the news at the moment. Try and get bite size, understand what's happening, but don't sort of delve too much into it, and focus on things that are in your control. Being kind, compassionate to yourself and also to others, and remembering that it's not selfish to look after yourself as well. So and up here is that's kintsugi. That's the pot. So these cracks, it's about when a pot is cracked. It's about when you bring it together. It's more beautiful when it's being broken. It comes together and it's mended. It draws your attention to the gold in the cracks. I think that's a nice analogy for resilience and being stronger after adversity as well. I hope we will be. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it, really. So that's me, Colin at cbt.tokyo. Don't hesitate to ask me any questions. I'm happy to share any resources that I have. Okay. Thanks, Sam.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Colin. Some more great info there. We're just going to talk very quickly about eating and drinking habits. We're not going to go into a lot of detail about nutrition, but I think at the moment a lot of the issues that people are having with eating and drinking resolve around sort of boredom and emotional-based eating habits, and a lot of this sort of ties back into some of Colin's points. But if you find yourself eating more because you're emotional, that's your typical way of dealing with that, or because you're bored, then these issues need to be addressed separately. So if you do notice that pattern, then things aren't likely to change unless you actually address the underlying issue. Some people, as we've said several times, this is all affecting everyone differently. Some people might actually be eating better, not having to go out for work and things like that. But a lot of us sort of do fall into a little bit of that holiday mode. So it's important that we try and avoid that. One of the things is to try and make sure that you're shopping carefully. So if you're not buying large amounts of snacks and unhealthy food, then you're not likely to eat them. They're not there in the house and they're not easily consumed. When you buy unhealthy or treat food, in a normal environment, you're not going to have the same opportunities to eat that food. You might buy, a packet of chocolate, and that might last, several weeks because you just don't get around to eating it. It's not there at the times where you are bored and a little bit hungry. Whereas being in isolation, that changes everything. So just keep that in mind when you do your grocery shopping, and try and make sure that you're minimising the things that you consider unhealthy foods when you're shopping. If you have that extra time, trying to learn cooking. So again, this is an opportunity to learn an extra skill. And if there's specific cuisines that you enjoy, learning to cook some basic recipes from those cuisines, and focus on what can be done cooking using healthy foods. Keep an eating schedule. So what I've talked about with programming in your exercise into your diary, and as Colin talked about with consistency in terms of sleep time, you also want to try and develop an eating schedule. And if you know that you get hungry at certain times, and you do require a certain number of snacks throughout the day on a regular basis, and try and put that in your eating diary as well, or your eating schedule, so that you've got those snacks to look forward to, and you're not just snacking for the sake of it. With those snacks, if you have an idea, there's a lot of ways that we can go in terms of this the whole nutrition thing. But if we're talking about sort of calorie balance and healthy weight management, if you know that you can allow yourself some unhealthy snacks or treat snacks without causing a great debt to your or creating a great calorie surplus is what we call it, then try to program those into your eating schedule as well, so that you do have those treat foods there in your schedule, and again, you're not just eating them out of boredom. If you can, snacks should include protein, as this will have a satiating effect and limit hunger afterwards as well. And alcohol, again, try to write it into the schedule if you can. So, rather than just drinking because you're at home and you haven't got anything better to do, say early in the week, okay, I'm going to do this, and as a reward, if you like, I'm going to have maybe a couple of glasses of wine on a Friday, so that you keep some sort of sense of control of everything, and don't let it get out of control. And the same as with the foods. If you know that once you start consuming alcohol that you have difficulty putting the brakes on that, then try to limit the amount they actually keep in the house. So maybe just keep one bottle of wine and a couple of beers, so that you don't go through what you have and think, I could do with a little bit more. So that's just some basic tips in terms of controlling your eating and drinking habits. So we've almost gone a little over time. Just a few sort of closing points. things that I've found helpful is being grateful for family time. With my work schedule, I don't tend to have a lot of time to spend with the family, so I've really treasured the time that I've had. My kids are quite young, they're 2 and 4, and I know that, you know, at times it's difficult having a 2 and 4-year-old wanting your attention. But yeah, I was saying to my wife the other day, we'll probably look back on these times in 10 years and say, yeah, it was a tough time. It was, you know, the time of uncertainty, and, you know, as Colin described before, we're all worried about certain things, but it's probably a time that we'll treasure as well, because we got to spend, especially me, I got to spend that extra time with my boys. Reaching out to those who are struggling. So if you know that people are really struggling in this situation, do try and you know, lend an ear and lend them your time. Especially if you know that there are people in isolation that don't have the loved ones that they're living with, and you know, especially if you're in those areas of the world that are in a stricter lockdown, it can be really tough for those people. So, you know, reaching out, you know, jumping on Zoom or whatever it is that you use, and just having a chat to those people. As I said, try and make the best out of a bad situation. You know, this can be from a, you know, personal perspective, as we talked before about, you know, trying to learn more about yourselves, learn new skills, you know, improve certain parts of your life. We're using this opportunity to, you know, expand different parts of our business and working on things that we can improve in our business. So I think there's always ways to make the best of a bad situation. And, you know, adversity should be seen as a challenge to get better. And like Colin said before, you know, viewing this as a challenge is likely to, you know, put that positive spin on things. It's something we've heard probably too much, that we're all in this together, but it's very true. This is a very unique circumstance, and we're all having to help each other out here. Colin and I have just offered off a few little pointers of from our experience and from the work that we do, but there's, you know, obviously a lot of other people out there with you know, skills and ideas that can help all of us in these sort of situations. So if you do feel like you have something to contribute to everyone getting through this together, then I think that it's sort of on each of us to try and help each other. Colin, did you have any other sort of closing points?
No, that's great. Thanks, Sam. That's a really nice closing summary there. Yeah.
So if you are after any further information, I know a lot of you are familiar with Club 360, but like I said at the top, we do offer a range of different services, and most of these services are still available via remote consultation. The physiotherapy, we are still consulting out of Tokyo Medical and Surgical, so we do still have that service available there, as well as the Bluff Clinic in Yokohama. But we are offering online remote consultations for physio, osteo, personal training. We've got some great online fitness classes, and nutrition counselling and ergonomic consultations we can also do remotely as well. The only thing, unfortunately, we can't do, which is probably something a lot of people need at the moment, is our massage service, but that's a pretty difficult thing to do remotely. So if you are after any more information on Club 360, or if you do want to set up a consultation either now or once we are back into the full swing of things, you can go to club360.jp or info@club360.jp there. And then Colin, just go through your details there.
Yeah, that's it. So you can contact me at my website, cbt.tokyo. I work out of the Tokyo Medical Surgical Clinic. At the moment, I'm only offering remote consultation. So using Zoom or Google Meets, or whatever people prefer, really, wherever they feel secure. Because I do cognitive behavioral therapy, it actually lends itself very well to remote consultations. I can offer text, real-time texting, or telephone or video consultations. Yeah, because it's really what you do outside of the sessions that counts, really. So yeah, or if you've just got any questions, just contact me. I'm happy to share any resources that I have. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much for attending. We really appreciate everyone, you know, lending us an hour of their time and listening in, and we hope that you all got something out of it. If any of you do have any questions, I think the chat function is open, although I'm not sure about that. Or if you do feel comfortable turning on your camera or just your microphone, feel free to do so. I believe we've got our chat open there. Thanks very much, Neil. I appreciate you sitting in.
Yeah.
Anyone else? 10 seconds.
Yeah, thanks very much, guys. It was great. Very helpful.
Cheers, Neil. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, I got to run now, but yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks, Sam and Colin, for putting that on. Really spending your time with us. Much appreciated.
You're welcome.
My pleasure, Neil. We'll look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, talk to you later. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, sir. Okay.